Donald Trump threatened tariffs linked to Greenland. Then he backed off and said he had reached a framework for a deal with European allies. So is the crisis over? Not exactly. Because the moment those tariff threats surfaced, one phrase started popping up across European capitals: the EU's so called trade bazooka. That trade bazooka is not just a nickname, it refers to a real EU law called the Anti Coercion Instrument, or ACI. It is designed for one specific situation: when a foreign country tries to pressure the European Union or one of its member states using trade or economic threats to force political decisions. So, what exactly is it, and why does it matter to the United States? The Anti Coercion Instrument is an EU regulation that entered into force on 27 December 2023. The European Commission describes it as a tool to protect the EU and its member states from economic coercion by countries. The idea for the instrument goes back to 2021, when the EU watched one of its members, Lithuania, face trade pressure from China during a dispute linked to Lithuania's ties with Taiwan. It became a major example of how economic pressure can be used to isolate and punish a smaller country, and why the EU wanted a stronger, bloc-wide response. So what can the EU actually do with the instrument? The ACI gives the EU a framework to respond if it concludes coercion is taking place and negotiations fail. Potential measures including restricting certain trade flows, limiting access to EU public procurement, and taking steps related to investment and services. The EU presents the ACI primarily as a deterrent. In other words, it is meant to signal that economic pressure has consequences, ideally preventing escalation before countermeasures are even needed. But this is not an instant retaliation button. Reporting suggests it could take at least months, with estimates often starting at around 6 months, because the EU has to assess the situation and coordinate across member states. And that brings us to the scale of what's at stake. The EU and the US have one of the world's biggest trading relationships. Trade between the EU and the US in goods and services was worth about 1.7 trillion euros. This is not limited to one category. It spans major exports on both sides, including sectors such as pharmaceuticals, vehicles, medical and industrial products, energy, and a large services relationship too. So even if Trump has stepped back from that specific tariff threat for now, the bigger issue remains. The EU's trade bazooka exists because Europe wants a formal way to respond if economic pressure is used as a political weapon. Any serious trade conflict would have consequences that spill beyond politics and into businesses, investment, and consumer prices. That is why the trade bazooka keeps coming up. Not because Europe is eager to use it, but because it is designed to make one message clear: economic coercion comes with a cost.